You're not going to get a dime from me, Dan. You're too old, too stubborn, and too pathetic to handle anything." Her words hit like a hammer, echoing in the sterile, cold courtroom of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. My ex-wife, Linda, stood there in her navy suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, her lawyer whispering rehearsed lines into her ear. I gripped the edge of the polished oak table, knuckles white, the air thick with tension, the faint smell of printer ink and polished wood filling my lungs. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell us where you're watching from. I'm Daniel Harris. I'm 63, retired from over 35 years as an auto mechanic in Cedar Rapids. My hands still bear the grease stains from decades of fixing engines, tightening bolts, and helping neighbors get their cars running again. I may not have a suit that costs thousands or a corner office, but I built a life with my own hands, and Linda wants to strip it all from me. We married young. I was 22, she was 20. We bought a small two-bedroom house in a quiet Cedar Rapids neighborhood, the kind where kids ride bikes on the sidewalks and neighbors know your name. I worked long hours at the shop while she stayed home, taking care of the kids, the house, and the endless parade of dinners and school events. I never begrudged a day of it. Over the years, I sacrificed more than most. When she wanted to take art classes or buy a new car, I covered the bills. When the kids needed college money, I picked up extra shifts at the shop. When she insisted on renovating the house, I spent nights under the floorboards, rewiring, repairing, ensuring that every dollar was stretched as far as it could go. But now, decades later, she stood across from me smirking, acting as though my lifetime of hard work counted for nothing. "You were never smart with money," she said, voice loud enough for the court stenographer to catch every word. "I don't know how you even survive day to day without me managing your life." Her lawyer interjected smoothly. "Your Honor, Mr. Harris has demonstrated financial irresponsibility and poor judgment. My client is simply seeking what's fair." I stopped him with a look. I wasn't here to be lectured. I was here to protect what was mine. I sat back for a moment, letting the noise fade. Cedar Rapids had been my world for over 40 years. The little diner where I had breakfast every Saturday, the credit union where I kept my savings, the shop where I'd spent my youth repairing cars, all of it was at risk because she wanted to rewrite the story of my life. Linda's words weren't just an attack. They were a declaration of war. And I realized, as I sat there, that this was bigger than property, money, or even pride. This was about survival, about proving that I, Daniel Harris, wasn't someone to be dismissed or underestimated. As the judge called for a short recess, I felt a spark deep in my chest, a slow, deliberate resolve forming. I wasn't going to lose. Not now. Not after everything I'd built. Not after all the sacrifices I'd made. I had no idea yet how far this battle would go. But I knew one thing. Linda had underestimated me, and that would be her first mistake. Linda leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with that practiced grace she always used when she wanted to look untouchable. "You know, Dan," she said, voice smooth as polished glass, "I've always wondered how you managed to keep a business running. You were lucky I was there to handle the bills." I gritted my teeth, staring at the floor for a moment before looking up. "Lucky?" I asked, my voice quiet but sharp. "You mean lucky for you, right? Because without the shop, without me working double shifts, you wouldn't have had anything to manage. Don't forget that." Her lawyer, Mr. Temple, leaned forward, lowering his voice so only the judge could hear. "Your Honor, my client is merely highlighting Mr. Harris's financial mismanagement." "Financial mismanagement?" I barked, cutting him off. "You mean paying for the kids' college tuition, covering every repair bill she couldn't handle, and keeping this house running while you shopped for art supplies and vacations?" The courtroom fell silent. I let my words hang there, each syllable sharp, measured. This was no longer just a divorce hearing. It had become a stage for her contempt and my vindication. Linda smirked, brushing imaginary lint off her sleeve. You're still so dramatic, Dan. Honestly, the thought of managing money or making decisions terrifies you. That's why you've always needed me. I felt something tighten in my chest, a familiar ache that had nothing to do with age or fatigue. Betrayal. Not just from a spouse, but from someone who knew your weaknesses, who had lived with you for decades, and was now weaponizing them in public. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I had to be careful. Anger alone wouldn't win this. Evidence would. And I had Margaret's lessons embedded in my own records. Receipts, bank statements, contracts, all meticulously kept over the years. Every time she had insisted I double-check bills or track payments, it had been preparation for a day like this, even though neither of us could have imagined she'd be gone before it happened. After the recess, I quietly approached the judge. "Your Honor," I said, holding up a folder, "I'd like to submit evidence that counters the claim of incompetence. Documents showing consistent financial responsibility over the last 30 years, including all payments I've made on behalf of my ex-wife and our children. Every mortgage, every tuition, every repair bill, everything is recorded here." The judge nodded, her eyes scanning the papers. "Mr. Harris, these appear to be organized and verifiable. Are these originals or copies?" "Copies, Your Honor, but notarized and cross-checked with bank statements." "I can provide originals upon request." Linda's expression shifted, a flicker of panic. She leaned toward Mr. Temple, whispering furiously, papers trembling in her hand. He's bringing receipts? How did he—" "I kept everything," I said softly, more to myself than anyone else. I knew someone would try to rewrite history. I just didn't think it would be you. The judge adjusted her glasses, reviewing the folder page by page. Each line of numbers, every transaction, was undeniable. My careful record-keeping, something she had mocked me for decades, was now my shield. Linda's smirk faded, replaced by the faintest quiver. She tried to speak, but the words caught somewhere in her throat. Her lawyer cleared his throat, attempting to intervene, but the momentum had shifted. The quiet murmur of the courtroom, once filled with anticipation, now seemed to side with me. After a tense pause, the judge looked at both of us. "It appears that the petitioner's claims of incompetence are unsupported by factual evidence. Mr. Harris has maintained financial responsibility and oversight for all assets in question." I felt my chest expand with a slow, controlled relief. Not victory yet, but a crack in the wall of betrayal. Linda's face went pale. She looked around, noticing the murmurs from the public benches, the neighbors, friends, and even a few shop regulars who had come to watch. Every whisper was a blade, slicing away at the image she had tried to project. This doesn't prove anything about future management," she stammered, her voice tight. I leaned forward slightly, my tone calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, with all due respect, it proves that I have consistently managed finances responsibly, often covering gaps left by my ex-wife's spending decisions. And while the future can never be guaranteed, my track record is concrete, documented, and undeniable." The judge nodded, flipping a few more pages before looking back at Linda. "This court will continue to hear the matter, but I am already inclined to question the motives behind this petition. Evidence clearly favors Mr. Harris's capability and prudence." Linda's lawyer shot me a venomous look, lips tight, but his options were limited. I could almost hear the wheels turning, planning, plotting, but I had already begun to anticipate them. After the hearing adjourned, the tension outside the courthouse was palpable. Linda stormed to her car, slamming the door so hard the echo bounced off the brick walls. Her voice, though quiet, reached me as I stepped onto the steps. "You think this is over, Dan?" I smiled faintly, the weight of calm confidence settling in. "Not even close. But when it's done, you'll see exactly who's been responsible all along." And for the first time, I truly believed it. Because I had proof, I had patience, and most importantly, I had a plan. A plan that would ensure the betrayal she thought would destroy me would instead destroy her. That night, I sat in my dimly lit living room, Margaret's old clock ticking quietly in the corner, the smell of cedar from the porch mixing with the faint aroma of coffee I'd brewed earlier. I spread out the folder of documents on the kitchen table, each page a testament to years of sacrifices, loans, and payments I'd made for the family. Margaret had been meticulous. She knew I wasn't naturally organized, but she'd always insisted on keeping records. I realized now that those records weren't just for me. They were my shield against the greed and manipulation that had surfaced in Linda. I pored over bank statements, canceled checks, and receipts, tuition payments for our children, repairs for our vehicles, even bills for the small diner I used to visit every Saturday morning. Every line had a story. Every dollar had a purpose. And all of it painted a clear picture. I was far from incompetent. The next morning, I visited my old friend Jim Walters at Cedar Rapids Credit Union. Jim had been my banker for decades, watching my life unfold through deposits, loans, and withdrawals. He greeted me with a knowing look. "Looks like you're in the thick of it, Dan," he said, shaking his head. "I am," I admitted. "Linda's trying to take everything. Court says I can't be trusted to handle my own finances." Jim chuckled dryly. "They clearly don't know you, or they think that by playing the numbers game, they'll win. But numbers don't lie, Dan, and you've got plenty to prove yourself." I slid a copy of Margaret's binder across the table. "Look at this. Every loan I covered, every payment I made for them. It's all here." Jim examined the papers, nodding slowly. "This is solid. If you play it right, you can turn the tables. And don't forget, the law tends to favor those who can demonstrate competence and foresight." His words gave me a spark of hope, but also a reminder. I needed strategy. This wasn't about brute force. It was about patience, timing, and making sure every move was calculated. I returned home with a renewed focus. Over the next few days, I quietly made calls. I spoke with a local attorney, Martin Hayes, a retired lawyer who had helped neighbors settle property disputes. He reviewed the binder and bank records and nodded with approval. "This is perfect," he said. "It's factual, verifiable, and it tells a story. The judge will see that Linda's claims of incompetence are baseless." I also contacted my sister, Carol, who lived in Omaha. She had always been my confidant and had witnessed firsthand Linda's manipulations over the years. We agreed to be in constant contact, ready to present any additional testimony if needed. Meanwhile, Linda continued her campaign of humiliation. She called friends, neighbors, even some of my old colleagues, spreading rumors that I was incapable of handling my affairs, that my health was failing, that I was living beyond my means. Each day brought a new insult, another attempt to turn the town against me. One evening, she showed up at my driveway unannounced. "Dan," she said, feigning concern, "maybe it's time to accept the truth. You can't manage this on your own. Let me take care of things." I stopped her with a raised hand. "I've had enough of your care. I've kept this house, my finances, and my dignity long before you tried to steal them. And I intend to keep them." Her eyes narrowed, and I saw the first crack in her composure. She realized that I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. That night, as I locked the doors and watched the autumn wind sweep fallen leaves across the yard, I made my decision. The next court hearing wouldn't just be a defense. It would be an exposure. Every lie, every manipulation Linda had tried to use against me would be revealed. Every false claim, every rumor, every insult would backfire spectacularly. I arranged for copies of all the financial records to be delivered to the court and prepared a timeline showing how Linda had benefited from my sacrifices while attempting to paint me as incompetent. I even discovered a few inconsistencies in her own financial statements, hidden loans, and overspending that hadn't been disclosed properly during divorce proceedings. By the time the hearing arrived, I was ready. Calm, composed, and armed with undeniable evidence, I walked into the courtroom with a quiet confidence that surprised even me. The judge's eyes scanned the room as I approached. Linda's smirk was still there, but her hands trembled as she held her papers. Her lawyer whispered frantically, sensing that the narrative was slipping through their fingers. I placed the binder on the table, opened it carefully, and let the evidence speak for itself. Every receipt, every statement, every note from Margaret became a weapon of truth. Linda's face tightened as the judge examined the documents. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues, people who had been swayed by Linda's rumors, now saw the reality. The balance had shifted. The betrayal that had begun with an insult, a public dismissal of my abilities, was about to turn into something she could never undo. And I knew, in that moment, the final confrontation was coming. The courtroom was silent, except for the soft rustle of papers and the occasional cough. Judge Harlan, a stern woman with graying hair pulled into a tight bun, looked at me with curiosity, then nodded for me to continue. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady, "what you have before you is not just a divorce dispute. This is a matter of truth, accountability, and decades of responsibility. My ex-wife has attempted to portray me as incompetent, incapable of managing my own finances, and a danger to my household. Nothing could be further from the truth." I opened Margaret's binder carefully, letting the pages fan across the table. Receipts, bank statements, mortgage payments, tuition bills, all meticulously organized, notarized, and cross-checked. I lifted each page so the court clerk could copy them if needed. "Here," I said, pointing to a series of notes in Margaret's handwriting, "is proof of every loan I covered for my children, every payment I made for our household, and every contribution I made that ensured our family stayed afloat." Linda's face went pale. She leaned toward her lawyer, whispering frantically, her voice sharp with panic. How did he get these? They're private. He can't." "I kept every record," I said quietly, not taking my eyes off her. I was always the one handling the finances, not for incompetence, but for responsibility. And these documents show it. The judge reviewed the binder, her eyes scanning the pages carefully. "These are thorough, verifiable, and consistent," she said. "It appears that the petitioner's claims regarding Mr. Harris's competence are unsupported by the documentation presented here." Gasps echoed across the room. Friends, neighbors, even a few familiar faces from the local diner, all watching silently, shifted in their seats. I felt a wave of quiet satisfaction. Not triumph, not yet, but the first true sense of justice. Linda's lawyer tried to interject. "Your Honor, even with these documents, the question remains whether Mr. Harris can manage his affairs going forward." I leaned forward, calm but firm. "Your Honor, I have maintained accounts, paid bills, and managed property responsibly for over 40 years. I have no outstanding debts that aren't accounted for, and I have a clear history of financial responsibility." I handed over a notarized letter from Jim Walters, my banker at Cedar Rapids Credit Union, confirming my account status and management capabilities. The judge read it, then set it down with finality. Linda's smirk faltered. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. She tried to speak, but the words didn't come. Her carefully constructed image of control was crumbling, and everyone in the room could see it. The judge turned to her. "It appears to the court that the petition is motivated less by concern and more by personal gain. Considering the evidence and Mr. Harris's clear ability to manage his affairs, the petition for conservatorship is hereby dismissed. Costs will be borne by the petitioners." The gavel struck. The sound echoed like a bell through the courtroom. Final and resolute, Linda sank into her chair, her eyes darting around, realizing that the courtroom had witnessed not only the truth, but her own unraveling. Eric's face paled too. He had believed that I was fragile, that he could control the narrative. Instead, the truth had exposed him and his schemes. I packed my binder carefully, my hands steady now, a calm satisfaction settling in my chest. The betrayal, the insults, the years of manipulation, they had all led to this moment. And justice, in its quiet, undeniable form, had prevailed. As I walked out of the courtroom, the autumn wind brushing my face, I realized how important it was to preserve dignity. Linda's attempts to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly. The neighbors who had once doubted me now saw the truth. The children who had been shielded from responsibility by her influence would eventually understand the depth of the sacrifices I had made. I stepped onto the courthouse steps and looked out over Cedar Rapids. The leaves swirled in the crisp air, a reminder of seasons passing, of patience and perseverance. I had won, not just a legal battle, but the restoration of my dignity, my peace, and my life's work. Linda and her lawyer left quietly, a stark contrast to the arrogance they had brought in. I knew they would talk, perhaps even attempt to repair their reputations in whispers. But the damage had been done. Their schemes, their lies, their betrayals, they had all failed. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of calm. The battle had been long, exhausting, and emotional, but the lesson was clear. Truth, responsibility, and persistence triumph over greed. Manipulation and arrogance. I returned home, Margaret's old clock ticking steadily, the roses in the garden catching the golden light of late afternoon. I had my house, my memories, and my peace. And in that quiet victory, I found a poetic justice that no court order could ever grant me. The satisfaction of knowing that honesty and hard work, the values I had lived by, had finally won. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. If you want, I can now start a completely new serialized story with a fresh betrayal plot, following the same rules and structure. So you have another 7,000, 8,000 word story ready for release. Do you want me to do that next? The weeks after the courtroom victory were surreal. Cedar Rapids seemed quieter somehow, as if the town itself had acknowledged the shift. I returned to my routine, fixing engines at the shop, visiting Miller's Diner on Saturday mornings, and tending Margaret's roses in the backyard. Each day carried a sense of reclaimed dignity, a subtle reminder that justice had its own pace. But life has a way of testing even the strongest victories. One crisp November morning, I received a letter in the mail from the county assessor's office. My curiosity piqued. I tore it open, only to find a notice that Eric and Linda had attempted, in secret, to place a lien on the house while I was in court. They'd failed to disclose it, of course, and the legal system had already nullified it. I smiled, shaking my head. The audacity and the futility. I called Carol, my sister, who had been my steadfast support throughout the ordeal. "It's over," I said, leaning back in my chair. "They tried one last trick. It failed, just like the rest," Carol laughed. "Dan, you did what they never expected. You kept calm, stayed organized, and let the truth do the talking. That's all you needed." The next day, I returned to the shop, feeling the comforting weight of routine. I greeted Jim, the bank manager, and a few neighbors who had come by to check in. Their congratulations were sincere, tinged with relief that I had emerged unscathed. Even the kids from the neighborhood waved as I walked past, some asking about my victory, others just happy to see their familiar Saturday morning presence. Eric's downfall became public gossip in Cedar Rapids over the following weeks. His construction business collapsed, clients pulled out, and creditors hounded him relentlessly. Word spread that he had tried to exploit the courts for personal gain, and many locals now questioned his character. Linda fared little better. She had relied on appearances, manipulation, and half-truths, But the court had exposed the reality. Friends distanced themselves, quietly acknowledging that her ambition had crossed moral lines. Rumors of her attempts to take what wasn't hers lingered in town, a subtle stain on her reputation. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding what had always been mine, not just property or money, but peace of mind. I repaired a leak in the roof myself, fixed the front fence, and even restored the porch swing Margaret had loved. Each task felt like a quiet triumph, a reclaiming of space and self. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Cedar Rapids, casting long shadows across the yard, I sat on the porch swing with a cup of coffee. The roses glowed in the fading light, their fragrance rich and grounding. I breathed deeply, savoring the calm, feeling a sense of poetic justice settle over me. I thought about Linda and Eric, about betrayal, and about the lessons Margaret had left behind. Her meticulous records, her foresight, her insistence that I keep track of everything. They had become my sword and shield. She had known that the ones we love most can sometimes hurt us most, and she had prepared me to face it, even after she was gone. The victories of the courtroom were meaningful, but the real triumph was internal. I had faced humiliation, betrayal, and attempts to steal my dignity, and I had emerged not bitter, but steadfast. I realized, in that quiet moment, that poetic justice isn't always loud. It's measured, patient, and deeply satisfying. As the night settled in, I felt a quiet smile spread across my face. Cedar Rapids was calm. My house was mine. My memories were intact, and the betrayal that had once threatened to undo me had instead illuminated my resilience. The cicadas hummed in the distance, the air crisp with the promise of winter, and I knew that, for the first time in years, I was truly free. I had reclaimed not just my home, but my dignity, my peace, and my sense of purpose. And so, the story closes on a quiet victory, a reminder that those who betray may try to take everything, but the truth, patience, and steadfastness will always endure. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.